thank all of you who are here for joining us today for this, the uh, ninth presentation in the Spring 2021 Sustainability Research and Practice Seminar. The Office of Sustainability is very happy to be able to co-sponsor this series with our colleagues in the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs and the Office of Digital Learning and Innovation, as well as the members of the Sustainability Council's Scholarly and Creative Activities Committee. So thank you to all of you, and thank you to our speaker today, Professor Martha Donkor of Women and Gender Studies and the History Department. And without further ado, I'd like to pass the digital floor to you, Professor Donkor.
Well, thank you, Brad, and thank everybody else for coming in this afternoon to listen to my little talk. I was sort of surprised that I got the invite, but I'm also happy that I got it because then you get to meet people that you wouldn't meet otherwise. So thanks. Now I want to start just with a little bit. Are you aware that a kid was thrown off the wall, the fence wall in the southern border um, this past weekend? Do you know about that story? Well, 2-year-old kid was thrown over an 18-foot fence. The parents were coming down from the south, wanting to enter the US. And it happened that the kid is a Ghanaian kid. That is where I come from. The father had managed to enter and they wanted the child to come into. So they threw him across the fence. And you wonder why anybody would do that. What would force people to take such risks in order for them to enter the United States? So I thought that was a very good segue for me to enter the talk today. And let me go in here quickly, share the screen, and no, not from current slide. Okay. So I want to start with this old idea about immigration. Uh, Dr. Adorante Adepoju, Nigerian sociologist, demographer, he had this quote, and I had it in my thesis also. So I thought it would be worth sharing. He said that migrant women were followers of men. And so they couldn't make independent decisions to travel. If a woman will travel, then she is traveling as a married woman, which then begs the question, how about women who were not married? No, then they didn't go anywhere, as per his observation. So following this, I would leave this here, but let's hold the thought. Then let's go through a few other things, and then we would come back to the idea that women somehow have to follow men. Why this is the case? Is it still happening, or is it something that happened in the past? Would come back to this, but for the moment, let's look at the push factor. You know that often when we talk about immigration, we put it within that larger framework of pull and push factors. Something will have to get you out of your country or your place of sojourn, and then something would attract you to a particular destination. So within the framework of the push, what was happening in Ghana in the 1980s? Because that is my starting point. Now, I believe that you know about the Save the World thing that American musicians is saying, yes. At that time also there was drought in Ghana and there were fires. So by early 80, 81, 82, the environment was devastated. Very many Ghanaians, very many Ghanaians were going without food. And then there was a military takeover in the government. So you have environmental problems and then political issues in the name of a fake revolution. So Ghanaians were at that point in their lives where there was general insecurity in the country. So very many Ghanaians left for Nigeria because of the oil boom over there. But hardly had they settled in Nigeria, Then the Nigerian government issued a quit order. That is how we call it in Ghana, leave the country. So very many Ghanaians had to come back to Ghana. We call them returnees. So you have a military a revolution, which made Ghana a dictatorship. You had an environmental crisis on your hands. And then you have an influx of immigrants who had been returned from Nigeria. So that was the situation, to the degree that very many people lost weight because of hunger and let me, yes, bring it in here so we can see. Very many Ghanaians lost weight. So you see people's very prominent clavicles. They call them Rollins chain. The then military leader. So you wearing his chain, literally. That is how very many people who couldn't, the environment, the soil couldn't, you couldn't farm because it wasn't raining. And the little food that they had stored either burnt or we consumed everything. So we were dependent on international aid in Ghana in the early 80s. Now, when it happens like this, you feel the poverty, right? The poverty and then the hopelessness. Where do you go? What happens to you? So for the folks that could afford at the time, the obvious choice was to travel. But where would you go? So when you look at environmental problems alone as a standalone factor, it had a huge impact on people's decisions to leave Ghana in the 80s. But if they were the only reason, then probably we do not know, because the rains came back, then people went back to farming, things started to look up. Some of us, we went back to school. So that would have been okay. But then the World Bank and the IMF, they stepped in as usual. You know, those economic models, just study us, look at what we have done, go along the same lines, and you will be like us. And so they instituted structural adjustment. By 1986, structural adjustment programs were in place in Ghana. And those of us that are familiar with those programs, you know how they work. Well, withdraw government subsidies, cut back on employment, a whole lot of governments of, and then Ghana is that one country where government is the biggest employer. So when you combine poverty with retrenchment and government cut back, no healthcare, everything, we reached probably our lowest level in terms of hopelessness in that country in the 80s. So the folks that could afford, the ones that were in Nigeria and didn't come back home, or who were there and were brought home and had some money, decided to look abroad. And that, in a very short period, got very many Ghanaians leaving the country. It became an exodus. Some went to South Africa, and then from there they flew out to Europe. But very many went to Europe, especially to Germany, because Germany had that, we wouldn't say an open door immigration policy, but its immigration program was a little bit relaxed. You could go in and tell any story as an asylee, and then you could go in. And so from Germany and other points in Europe, they came down to Canada, especially, and then to the United States. So by about the late 80s and into the early 1990s, you begin to see the creation of a distinct Ghanaian immigrant community in major cities in the United States and in Canada. So that was one thing. Now I got these because of time, but I'm leaving them on there for people to click on them. They are like 10 minutes and 12 minutes. They show people who come through the Darien Gap between Colombia and Panama. So when we see caravans of people coming through the South, it's Mexicans coming in. No, they are not Mexicans. They are immigrant, well, asylees coming from all over the world. Most of them fly to Brazil, which has, I think it has an open door policy. And then from Brazil, some are able to walk, some would use other means, but the 66 mile gap between Colombia and Panama through dense forests with all that is where people pass. And that is where the kid that was tossed across the fence, that is where the parents, 66 miles, you would want to watch that. It's heart wrenching. So that gives you an idea. When I talk about hopelessness, what would push people to even want to do this kind of thing? But they come in regardless. So, then having thought about the push factors, let's look at the pull. And um, I just want to use one factor, and I want to look at the United States. For very many people around the world, US is the frontier. It might come as like, what frontier in what regard? Yeah, that is what it is. Everybody wants to come here. American culture, because of globalization, we see America, CNN runs 24/7. You go to any village in Ghana, you're going to watch CNN. People are now beginning to change their accents, although they are in Ghana. They want to speak like Americans, they dress like Americans. Everybody wants to be an American, everybody wants to come here. And why is that? Other than the cultural pool, it's also the dollar. If you take $1 American to Ghana right now, you get almost 6 cities. And 6 cities can prepare you a decent meal. So if I am able to send my mom 200 cities a month, and that is able to take care of her for the month, 200, sorry, $200, she gets more than 1,000 cities. And that is enough. Some people don't even get paid that much. So when you see the United States in this kind of light, everybody wants to come here. That becomes the proof. We do understand that Europe is there. Europe has the colonial relationship with countries in Africa. So very many people might want to use European metropolises in order for them to jump to Canada or the United States. But right now, they just come in straight. Now, coming in straight then brings in the issue of women, which is what I do, which is my area. So, what about women in this discussion? And let me go there quickly. Yes. So we know that immigration policy is that kind of thing. Anything for me personally, anything that is selective is also inherently biased, right? You may want tall people as opposed to short people. Short people will feel unhappy that they've been overlooked. But it's the same thing with immigration policy. United States immigration policy works on this assumption that first and foremost, we would want family reunification. You have to have your family members here that you want to join, then you join them. But the Ghanaian community wasn't well established until about the 1980s. So if you wanted to come here as a woman, who are you going to go to in the United States? So family reunification until fairly recently, when the people that came in the 90s had naturalized, they are Americans, and they may have family members back in Ghana who could join them. Family reunification didn't work too well for them. It didn't work that well for them. But some eventually would come in that. And that is what President Trump wanted to refer to as chain migration, that one person comes in and they want to bring every family member. Well, they do allow for immediate family members, children, adopted children. Some people can bring their aged parents and immediate family members and spouses, of course, you can bring them. So that created a niche for women to take advantage to enter the United States. Then we have people with some kinds of skills. The US wants people technology. So if you have tech skills, you could come here or you can come as a student. So this one is open for men and for women. Right. Now, we know that family reunification favors women more because in most cases, men take the lead and then the women would join. and we would know why shortly. But when it comes down to skills, again, when you look at places like Ghana and elsewhere in the global south, where women's education really wasn't paramount in the larger scheme of things, not very many people would have the skills that the United States requires for them to come here in this category. So some would come as students. So it becomes a class issue. If you come from a rich family, then you come to study. I did my education in Canada, and it was just by chance. No rich family background. I got a scholarship, and so I did. Um, I didn't think that I'll be able to come to the United States, so I didn't try to come here at all, and I ended up here. Um, and then we got refugees. Now, some people from Ghana went to Canada and claimed to be refugees, but in reality, they were not refugees, they were asylees. And let me draw the distinction between the two. To be designated as a refugee, you have to be in some kind of political crisis and war or war related issues. But these days, the UNHCR, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, it does allow for what we call economic refugees, people who are facing severe, dire economic situations. But they would declare refugee status at the place of origin or in a second country. So something happens in Ghana, like the revolution that happened in 81, and then say you escape to um, the Ivory Coast next door neighbor, but you have tons of people, Ghanaians there, then the UNHCR may say that these people are refugees. Once you've been so declared, the United States, Canada, Germany, Australia, the world's leading immigrant receiving nations, can go in there and then among the refugees determine people who can easily adapt, and then they would come in. So you come in with your legal papers as um, a landed immigrant in Canada or green card holder, as in the case of the United States. Now, asylees may also be in places of strife, places of some kind of difficulty, but they are individuals and they have not been designated as refugees. They don't see any way out of their situation, so they take themselves from that danger zone and then present themselves at the gate of the country that they want to enter. And then they declare that they are seeking asylum. So once you enter as an asylee, you are detained. They will put you in a detention center and they look through your case. So the folks that are coming down from the south that people are calling illegal immigrants, they are asylees. They got issues. Government looks through it, determines that you have a credible case, then they give you your legal documents and you enter and you stay. Um, People can take advantage of the asylum situation, but not with the refugee situation. In this case, it's not even the United States or Canada or even Australia that is determining that you are a refugee. It is the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. So those are the two things. So then how do women factor in these situations? Women work very well with family reunification. We would think that since women constitute a lot of refugees in almost all situations, that they would also be the largest number here, but no. When they go in, they're looking at people who can adapt, who can work, who have some kind of skill, or who can be trained. And so sometimes on humanitarian grounds, some women would get in. This situation didn't happen to Ghanaian immigrants. Some tried to come in as asylees, but most of them entered sometimes as illegal immigrants, or they would come in as independent immigrants or through family reunification. And that is how we got them and others from different parts of the world to enter the US. So when we go past that, look at the pull and push factors and how it would that women would be able to enter the US, then I want to just quickly look at when they arrive. The passage from Ghana to the US or from Ghana to Canada is an interesting one. Interesting to the degree that very many women are joining folks here, or they are just daring it. They want to go by themselves. How do they do it? And so they get what we call in Ghana connection men. And these are people, they're not smugglers per se. They help you to obtain a passport, they help you to buy your ticket, they're going to be taking you to your destination and you pay them. Now, they may fly with you to New York or fly with you to Amsterdam or Toronto, and that is where it ends. Whoever is coming to get you from there, now that is where the abuse starts. These guys, they're not women that are working in this system, the connection system. They would deliver you to another person, and that person takes you in, maybe for a week or two, before they release you because somebody else is coming that they might pick up. Now, for that time that you are there, are you a girlfriend, a wife, or just a visitor? Just let's leave it to our own imagination. Women are abused sexually. Sometimes they are left. If you are the one to say no, well, then go. Where do you go? You may not have facility in English. You don't know anybody. You might not have enough money. So the best bet is to stay along, do whatever happens, and then get them to help you to get some kind of legal recognition and you get in there. Men don't go through that. Very many women are aware of this situation. So until and unless you are the daring type and you don't care and you want to just risk everything and go, women would rather want to wait for a boyfriend or a husband, a brother, some male family member to take the lead and then try to get them in. So if we go back to the quote that I put up, that Professor Adepoju said that women are followers of men, it's not that they cannot make independent decisions to travel, but they make those decisions within the context of sexual assault and other kinds of deprivations that they probably are not in a position to endure. So that is how I said that I will connect the two. But once they arrive in town, meaning that they have arrived in the destination right here in the United States, even if they are meeting up with family members, and that is something that people might like, well, you are joining a spouse or there is a community that, yeah, but there is isolation. If you join the spouse, he gets up and he goes to work. Our houses are not built like this. Our houses are open. You got tons of people in there. You get to talk to people, you know stuff. Here you are enclosed. So that feeling of isolation, what do I do? Did I make the right decision to travel? Well, I came to school in Canada, and my first 2 or so weeks, I was wondering if it was worth the trouble after all. Although there were about 40 other Ghanaian students. So if I going to study, being very busy with my studies, still felt that isolated, I can imagine how these women would feel. So when they confirmed to me that in most cases they felt lost, even when they have spouses, that is a gender issue that men don't usually experience when they come in like that. And then, of course, the isolation and the loneliness, they go hand in hand. And often, because the men that are sponsoring these women to come in, if they came in as a family class, well, they pay a lot of money. The sponsorship, the ticket, all those things combined. And they don't have the money to spend. So once you join them, then you have to pay. So even before you arrive, they are looking for a job for you. So there isn't time for a jet lag. There isn't time to look around to see what is available to adapt to the situation before you start work. Some people get here Saturday, Sunday, Monday, they are starting work. And they're starting work as caregivers. Well, often they start as live out. So you go to take care of the person and then you go home. Now, if you do live in or live out, the hunger, and people might not like hunger in the United States. Uh-huh. How is that? Our cuisine is very different from what they cook here. So you're going to be eating a sandwich for dinner, salad. If that person had come from a rural background where these foods are not, we don't even eat them there. How do you cook? So you see that all these things are working in tandem. You are vulnerable to exploitation, to hunger. You just don't know. You are lost. But they become resilient. Often, people who were skilled, who were employed in some skilled trade or something in Ghana, come here and they lose their status. Well, with the men, most of them are going to go into cab driving and factory work as they find their way around adapting before going back to school or finding their own area of employment. But for very many women, the loss of status, um, it is temporary, but it's also sometimes it doesn't even happen to some of them because they were not doing any of these things that would say that okay, so she was killed and then she came here. They might have been selling stuff on the market. They come here, there is no open market to sell your stuff. So what do? Now you go into work. So lots of status works for different groups in different circumstances. Um, but co-work, here is where women somehow have an advantage that men don't have. People are not necessarily employing men to do live-in care work. They may do live out, you go, you take care, but if you're going to be living in, you cook, you clean, you do other house chores, which is traditionally women's work. So care work works for women, and then there is a market for it. There is a market for it. Baby boomers, now they are in their mid to late 70s, even into the 80s, depending on how old before their parents went to war and such. So all these folks, they're going to be needing care work. So that is ready employment for women. The little problem there is that the woman who comes straight from Ghana and they're planted in a home where she's not living with the family, you see the racial divide, the gender divide, the class divide. They are either put in an attic or in a basement, and then mostly they are taking care of rich white families because they can afford for this private care. So how does it happen? It is physical and it's also ideological. Stay in the basement. We see you when we need you and you do all the work around. And so it mimics those times when Black people were slaves and the ones that lived in the big house and the work that they did. But this is different. And the difference here is that this is work that you chose. So if you don't want it, you walk out. If you want it, you stay. And given that you are taking care of a person that is vulnerable, the white families also understand that these are people that can abuse them. So it works, in both ways. But so we got live in and then we got live out. And I think that this is my last slide, which is good. So the question that I have there is that, well, have women come full circle? And why would I ask that question? Here in the United States, we see domestic work in that kind of light. It is dirty work. It is invisible work. It is work that exposes people to all kinds of vulnerabilities. It doesn't pay well. And so it is done by people who are desperate, destitute, stuff like that. People don't seek work in the same way as they see other kinds of work. But here we have women who have risked everything to come here to the United States, and then they are doing care work. Is it worth it? Is it going to improve their statement? Now, have they come full circle? And I say no. Why? Because care work is going to give them some type of money that they wouldn't get back home, and it's going to give them access to things that they wouldn't get back home. And that makes the difference. So, how is that? People who remember that the context is the 80s, where you are impoverished, you become hopeless, there is nothing for you to do, your life is in danger from military folks who are terrorizing the neighborhoods and such. And then you come here, and all of a sudden, you live with the people that you are giving care to. So if you are lucky, you might not even rent a place, or you rent yourself a little room, or if you have a spouse, well, he has a place that he's renting. So spend about a month at your workplace, go home for about 3 days, and go back to the workplace. So these women are able to make a lot of money. Now, when one of them told me that she is giving herself 5 years and she would raise $100,000, I am like, well, I don't think I'll be able to raise $20,000 in 5 years. And we laughed as a joke, but think about it. Most of them are not paying taxes because they don't intend to stay here for good. They're going to go back. So they are able to take care of family members back home. They are taking care of children who wouldn't go to school ordinarily. Now they have a benefactor, so to speak, and sometimes they help other satellites, people that wouldn't get that kind of help anyways. Their own status is improved greatly. How is that? They can start a trade, and most people do that. They work, send the money home, start a trade. When they are no longer able to stay here, they go back and they have something to fall back on. And because very many of them don't pay taxes, they know that when they retire, they won't get any retirement money. So they maximize everything that they can make out of this. If they give themselves 10, 15 years to do this, dig their heels in, go for it, 10, 15 years, and they make tons of money. And then they go back home. Um, they build a house for themselves, for their communities. People who probably wouldn't have been able to buy bicycles in their time, now they are the big shots in town. So is it worth it for these women to risk it and come here? And the answer is yes. But is it fraught with difficulty? By all means. But the fact that women are able to do this is the reason that I try to argue against this whole analysis, the trope in the analysis that domestic work, it impoverishes women. The negativity about domestic work is something that I wanted to explore. And then I found out that it is not black and white. It is not that kind of binary that, oh no, you come here, you lose your status, you do this dirty work that you don't get paid a whole lot, and you become impoverished and the white family. No, it is not like that for very many people. The people, the women that I studied, ended up calling their type of domestic work private practice, right? Private service. So they are in there with you. And if they play well with the families, they make more. If they don't like it, they quit. But the bottom line is that they make enough money to go back home and become the middle class, probably even the upper class in society that they left behind impoverished. And I hope I have made the case that these women are doing the best for themselves. So that brings me to 12:38, and I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Donkor. There's just so much in your presentation for us to think about in terms of the sustainability questions that the Westchester University community is facing. Environmental issues, social issues, economic issues. And we're grateful that you've shared your scholarship with us today. It's 12:40, so we have 10 minutes. And usually we just open up the question and answer to anyone who'd like to pose questions. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay, so please, those of you who have been attending, uh, feel free to unmute yourself and pose your questions.
So the interesting part in the beginning about your talk was the impoverishment of people in Africa due to, I'm simplifying this, but due to colonialism and the takeover of traditional cultures and the way that they managed their resources. And women played a big role in that. Is there some, this is outside of your talk, but is there some recovery of those uh, well-founded, functional, effective, traditional strategies for doing well in your environment?
You know, uh, it's a difficult one to answer because we assume that after the British had left and we took over, that we were going to manage our own resources. And for a time, yes. The problems that we had were mainly political, but in terms of environmental degradation, no. But right now, there are probably over 100,000 Chinese in Ghana, and they are doing small scale mining. And so, water sources, the forests, the land itself is being destroyed. So, again, it is spurring another wave of immigration. So, the traditional structures that we had in place, Ghana is a primary producing country, cocoa, timber, and then minerals. Now, cocoa, small farmers, timber, foreign concerns, they come in and then they devastate the environment and they are not planting trees so that the familiar spaces where people did their farming, even if small scale, we didn't buy food. Today, the average Ghanaian is buying food, which is a problem. And the Chinese are taking over, which is a problem. Everybody is talking about it. Nobody is doing anything about it. So you see, we're going right back to the era of colonialism, a new kind of colonialism, one where we, instead of the colonialists going in to exploit us, we carry ourselves to the colonialist side, their space, and then we get exploited. Then that is sad.
Yeah. I had an opportunity to visit Ghana, and I have a number of Ghanaian friends.
You
It was
did.
it was with the Westchester group, and we stayed in Legon on the campus. What a beautiful place!
Yeah.
And we got to travel to Cape Coast, and then we went to Kumasi,
All right.
and there was uh, an amazing national park there, and ecotourism looked like it was maybe going to take hold. No.
Now, now. So now what they're trying to do, in fact, it's in the news today that they're getting people to clean the beaches so that they will be clean enough for tourists to want to come there. But it looks like everything is sad. It is sad. So people that can travel abroad, everybody wants to travel abroad. In fact, if you go to Ghana now, People aren't going to ask you, hey, what do you do for a living? They're asking how much money you brought, what car you brought, that kind of thing. Everybody wants money, but the jobs are just not there. And so, short of immigration, the next thing is to do really, really dumb stuff like killing people and using their past to do juju in hopes that that thing will bring you money. It is not very widespread, but it's scary. Nonetheless.
Martha, thank you for your talk today. You know, you and I have talked a lot over the years about your research and how you and I have done similar research. But I realize, you know, as a result of your talk today, I realize there's a question I haven't yet asked you, which
Yes.
is crazy given how many times we've talked about this. So, you know that one of the things I found most compelling about your research is the argument you made today, which is that this caregiving work is not necessarily, we can't see it as exploitative, and to do so would be reductive. And I'm thinking about the scholarship that I've taught in the past on how that talks about that, right? That says like care work in the US done by immigrant women is exploitative. That's it. And the argument for that, then sort of the history in relation to the feminist movement is really interesting, because then there's always that connection that's made, like, well, the reason we have these jobs available is because American women, you know, don't do the work,
Right.
or can't do the work, right? Because, you know, since 60s, 70s, we've entered the professional realm. So I'm wondering, how would you reframe that analysis, right? So, you know, kind of reshaping that conversation within women's and gender studies. How would you, what could we say instead? Because it always seems to still be even that, you know, maybe we shouldn't even have these jobs. Maybe we should just do our own work. But then of course your research finds how important these jobs are, at least to Ghanaian women, right? So how could we reframe that discussion? I don't know if that makes any sense.
It does make sense. I think we have to use a standpoint feminist theory. You know that if you want to understand the nature of a particular issue, talk to the people that are involved in the issue, right? So the women that are doing it, you see, from our vantage point, we see domestic work as devalued, and to the degree that we think it is devalued, and that is the reason that we are not able to work in the public, and you know all the arguments that we make about our work vis-a-vis what we do at home, we carry it into our analysis. But if we can stop for a moment and then give the people that are doing this work the chance to tell us their story, why they think they have to do it, for very many of them, it's not a matter of force. Nobody is forcing them to be in it. They choose to be there because of what they know they can get. Now, think for a moment about the person that has come in who probably is not legal, right? And then they get this nice place, even if they are living in the attic or down in the basement, nobody is disturbing them. They're making good money anyways. They intend to go back home anyways. How are you going to be telling them that somehow this work here is devalued, and therefore you doing it, you are also devalued by implication? It won't jive. It won't jive with them. So when we look at them from their perspective, what they think, instead of us speaking for them, let them speak to their own issues, to their experiences. They're going to be telling you that it's all good. Now, the houses that they have built in Ghana, if you see them, you would wonder, seriously? Yeah. Send $1,000 home, that is about 10,000 Ghana cedis. It goes a long way. So if they're able to 5, 10 years, they have their house, they have a business, they have a car. Go back home and your life changes. How do you convince such people that the work that you do, there is vulnerability there is devaluation, and so that work is not, nah, it won't work. So if we would approach it from standpoint alone, it will make a whole lot of difference in analysis. I don't know
Yeah.
if am I making sense?
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense to me. I love how you answer and shift there. And, let's go back to doing feminist methods in the way that we should be doing. And I
Yeah,
also think too how your research really actually elevates the status of care work in ways that, these other arguments have not, right? So overall, your research is really elevating the status of care,
yeah. We need people to care for our elderly.
right?
So if for nothing, the fact that there are individuals who are willing to do this, it is enough for us to value them. Instead of us using our own understanding of what domestic work means and then transposing it onto the public sphere and making arguments that, well, again, it depends the way that they themselves treat the people that are giving care. They don't treat them well. And so they think that that is what is happening. But folks will take that kind of abuse knowing that they are here for a reason. And they say that all the time. And some don't care.
We are at 12:50, and we usually in this series pause at this point because some people do have to log off and get to other classes or other responsibilities. But Professor Donkor, if you have a few more minutes and would be willing to stay on, there may be more questions. I know I have some.
Okay, yeah, I do. I do. Okay, thank you all. Those of you that can stay, I'm here.
Well, if I may jump in, then I'm curious if in your research you have um, spoken to immigrants from other countries in West Africa and in Anglophone Africa, and if you see any similarities. Anglophone Africa includes people from Southern and Eastern Africa as well. Western Africa immigrants could be coming from countries that border on Ghana, but have different colonial histories and therefore different Western language backgrounds. How have those connections been part of your research?
No, I have spoken to Sudanese refugees, and I got a book out of that. Um, but they were refugees, when the war. Now, of course, we do have South Sudan as a separate country. Now, when I spoke to them, it was just amazing how they were eager to come to the United States. But the moment they got here, something shifted, something changed. And I remember one time saying that they need to keep an eye on some of those folks because they identify with the Middle East. Um, some identify strongly with the Middle East. So when things happen to Muslims, then they feel like they are implicated in a way, that it affects their lives in a way, and also that they were coming in with a sense of America that is non-existent. They thought that they were just bringing them in here and they would just get things for free, just like they gave them stuff in refugee camps in Kenya from where they were lifted to this place. So all of a sudden they come here 6 months. That is how the refugee process works. 6 months, your sponsors will take care of you. After 6 months, you're on your own. You have to pay for your airfare, and then you're on your own. And so all of a sudden, like you brought us here and you left us in limbo, so to speak. So some of them are very bitter, either they were brought into this country and then left on their own to take care of themselves, which is a ridiculous argument. But those are the two communities are the ones that I have studied in detail, and they are very different. I don't know what the Sudanese women are doing specifically, but I studied more the Lost Boys, the folks that they call the Lost Boys. Yes, and I have some very serious concerns about some of them. But the great majority want to go back to help rebuild their country, but it is not at all safe there. So I haven't been able to connect with them for the past 2, 3 years to see what it is that they want to do. because I wanted to write a second book or article on their lives here now that they got a country, and I haven't been able to do that yet. So those are the two. I don't know about the other Anglophone countries and what it is. Nigerians far outnumber Ghanaians here, but I have not studied the Nigerian community at all.
And I'm curious too about the fact that so many of the people you've spoken to come to it sounds like so many of them come to the US with plans to eventually return to Ghana. I think sometimes the term immigrant is used to refer to people who are going to a place and intending on staying there. How does that distinction between people who intend on staying versus people who intend on returning to their country of origin, how does that come into the research that you've done?
You know, we say that all the time. We don't go often. We don't. They may go home for maybe a year, and then things don't, I mean, like they might have lived here 20, 30 years, have acquired American taste. So when they go home, it feels new to them, they can't. So it's like they have become birds of passage, you know, that they go and then they come back. Often they don't want to be buried here. And so when they're getting older, they'd rather go home because when you die here, taking the body home is a little bit more expensive. So they'd rather go home, spend the last few years, and then die as opposed to dying here and somebody determining that let's bury them here. They don't like that. They don't want to be buried here. So eventually they go. They go. Or else they die and the bodies are sent home.
Brad's on mute.
Oh, I was just asking if you or Amy had any questions before we wrap up.
Oh, sure.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I just, yeah, a couple just quick questions, just trying to imagine the experience. So do the care workers, do they have some access to ways of developing their skills, or is it their life experience that they bring to it?
They you know, like care work doesn't require a whole lot. Back home, we live in communal homes. We're taking care of the elderly, we're taking care of the sick. Women cook, we clean, we do the house chores. So other than using a stove, which some of them might not be familiar with, but then it doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to use a stove. They get it. They get it.
Sure.
The thing is that some get so used to this work that they get detached from the community. They could be gone, especially if they are not married. They could be gone for about 6 months, and then they come home one weekend and socialize, and then they go. They need the money. But once they've established some financial base and everything is okay, then they come home often, they might want to get married. So acquiring skills beyond caregiving now.
Yeah.
No.
So beyond that, is there some level of organization groups, advocacy groups that people can join and so on?
No, advocacy groups, not so much, but churches, town associations, community groups, funerals are big events in the Ghanaian community. And now outdoorings also, you got a baby and then people come in, it's a party, graduation parties, we have got into that thing and probably even taken it a step higher. So when events like that are going on, they get to come home and or some weekends given if they are living with good families. There was the one lady whose husband, the person that sponsored her here, but then they were divorced and she was doing full-time living. Then the guy passed away. And when she told her client, her employer that, oh, I need to be home. He says, but you are not married to him. So what are you going to do there? See the cultural disconnect right there. She has to be there because he brought her here, they were married, he was the father of her children, and she was going to be an integral part of the decision making, sending the baby back home. She defied him, went home, spent 4 days, came back, and continued her work like nothing happened. Sometimes when you're going out like that, then you get a replacement. You get somebody to just do the work for you. When you get paid, you give them the days that they worked, the money, you pay them, and that resolves the issue. So they have their own internal dynamic, how it works, who knows who wants to hire, the good families, bad families, what to do to ingratiate yourself with the families. The last thing you want to do is to steal their stuff because then you become a bad worker. But when you are a good worker, you get to eat for free. Um, that is how things work for them.
If everyone has just one more minute, I have one question. I didn't get to get in.
Yeah.
I've heard arguments for, from a feminist perspective, the government providing funding for domestic work, you know, whether it be for women for their own families or for others, making them almost like, you know, paid government positions so that all of the labor of like the housework, domestic work, caregiving that usually falls on the shoulders of women by default would not go unpaid. If something like that, if a policy like that were to be implemented, how do you think that that would affect the availability of domestic work for women outside of the family that are perhaps immigrating from other countries? Would you?
You know, that argument was current in the 70s. By the 1980s, there was the counter argument that this here isn't going to cut it because then it's going to isolate women more and more at home. And, you know, government is going to be involved in marital relationships and such. But just for quickly, if it happens like that, most women would rather want to stay at home. Now, the problem is the computation. How do we clock the hours? How many hours are you spending doing what? Like, so that is a non-starter. Every time that issue has come up in my classroom, students are like, no, but who would, it's your own home. So why should government pay you to do work at home? But we also do understand that the work that we do at home is the reason that others get to work full time in the public space. But if we give value to what we do at home, if we respect women for what they do, if men will step up a little bit and support women for what they do, I think that the stigma that attaches to domestic work and the bitterness that attaches to it over time would go away. But then there won't be people coming in to do this kind of work. I would rather stay at home, work around my house, and get paid.
Right. That's interesting. Thank you. It was interesting to hear another perspective in that argument, because I've only heard the one side so far.
Yeah, they made Maria Rosa de la Costa. She was the one that led this charge. Housework should be paid. Housework should be paid. Well, who should pay it? Government? On what basis? Everybody will stay at home.
Yeah.
But I don't think that is what we want.
Great, thanks.
Thank you so much,
Mhm.
Martha.
Well,
This
thank
was
you for giving me the space to talk about my research. Maybe some other time I can get something else to talk about.
we'd be very glad to invite you back. So, all right, thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Martha.
And
So nice to meet you.
we'll get you links to the recording and the PDF copy of your slides when that's ready, probably early next week.